Welcome back to Understanding VC. I'm your host Rahul. Today my guest is Chirag Gupta. Chirag is a managing partner at 8x Ventures, a venture capital firm based in Dubai that invests in DeepTech startups. Before 8x Ventures, Chirag held various positions at 500 Global, Careem, McKinsey, PwC and Confell. Now let's talk to him. Hi Chirag. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
So, I usually start off by asking where did you grow up? So, yeah, love to know your childhood, your interest growing up.
I'll keep it short because my early years of childhood was as simple as growing up in Delhi, usual school, and following normal Hindu rituals almost every week. And for the first 19 years of my life, there wasn't much excitement beyond that, except for the fact that I coded my first computer game when I was 11 years old, and I learned computer programming when I was 7 years old. So apart from those two achievements, I it was a very usual life that I had growing up.
So, when was this? 7 years?
So my father actually bought a computer for us in 1994, which was a very, very early era of computer education in India. And
Okay.
he got us a teacher to teach us computer to the entire family. And we learned programming at that from 1994 to 1996 for 2 years. I learned computer programming. In 1997, I coded a car race game. At that time, it was a very basic car race game, but I did that in 1997, which I was very very proud at that time, and I kept playing that game. Probably I was the only user, I guess, and I played that game for 6 months. I was very happy about it.
This is really cool because I think the first time I used a computer was in 1998 or 9. So, what did your father do to get a computer in 94 and also to show interest and to make sure that everybody in the family also picks it up? That is like so cool.
So I was very young, so I don't know how he got the computer. I have no idea. I just know for a fact that it was very expensive at that time. So I have this vague memory of some 50,000 rupees or something that he paid to buy that computer. And then we were paying some 10 or 15,000 rupees to someone who to come 3 times a week and teach us how to program on computers. So very exciting. I don't know specifics on how he managed to pull it together, how he managed to convince us, but we were just following at that time. We had no idea why we were doing it, but maybe he had a vision.
From programming computers at the age of 7, I mean, how did you end up in tech? What were your interests, I mean, during the teenage years and the first early career, etc.?
I so even though I have always been interested in technology, I actually studied commerce in my university, and I graduated with a degree of business studies from University of Delhi. So I kind of lost interest, not lost interest, but the lost touch on the computer programming during certain years. But after I finished graduated from my MBA program, I decided to study business analytics. For some reason, I actually felt that I find it a lot more exciting to study business analytics. Then I had fun studying business management. I'm not saying that I don't enjoy management, but if I have to choose, in the hindsight, definitely business analytics. But let's be mindful. I went to the university in 2003. At that time, business analytics was not the in thing. There were very
Yeah.
very few opportunities available to study computers, and computers it was like studying hardware more than the software, and software was like a very complex coding. The coding that we see now has simplified a lot and improved a lot and made it a lot easier to do that.
And I've read that you've lived in 11 countries, including where I'm from in Singapore. So, now what does that do to you as a person and or in terms of like, how does it help in work?
So after I finished my bachelor degree, I joined consulting. So before my MBA, after my MBA, collectively I have worked for about 10 to 11 years in management consulting. What management consulting does, it forces you to structure complex problems on a simple page. And what it also does is takes you learn a certain industry or function, and then you move from client to client, from country to country, solving similar industry or similar function problems. And management consulting gave me that opportunity to move around different countries and work with different governments, different companies. And I spent so much time working with governments of different countries, including Singapore government, including UAE government, including Saudi government, that the understanding that I built on how governments operate, how different people behave when you give the same recommendation, it's a way more complicated. And I can spend like an hour talking about what it did to me, but if I have to summarize in like probably a one statement, it made me open to new ideas. It made me realize everything that I know and assumed to be truth may not be truth in a different context. And what it also taught me is that the word can be changed if you do it in the right way.
I used to be very dismissive of like management, people from management consulting becoming a VC. My thought was that unless you've been an entrepreneur, should not become a VC. But I have a different opinion now. I think because even in my free time, what I end up doing is trying to understand as many industries as possible and to figure out, where the industry is going, where the world is going. So if you've been in consultancy, I think you get training to do that in a very structured way. I think it really helps if you want to be in venture. So how did you end up in venture in the end?
So after I kind of finished what I had to do for management consulting, I was looking to join some startup, and I built a startup also into 2014, which did not go well. 2015, which did not do well, but in 2019, I had a very strong inkling that I want to either start my own startup or I want to join some startup. The thought of starting a startup is actually very scary, and I completely empathize with startup founders. And I took the easier route. I joined a relatively more established startup, which is called Kareem. It's now
The
it got
Uber for
Yes,
yeah.
it used to be the Uber for the Middle East, or aspiring to be Ola for the Middle East. I'm using Ola because Ola has spun out in different services as well. And we got acquired by Uber in 2020. And I was holding the strategy position over there at that time. Very exciting position, very exciting experience. I saw from inside exactly how the technology companies operate. What are the pressures that the startup founders, even the established startup founder, even the unicorn startup founders are facing. And the learning was incredibly amazing. Once I learned that, I moved to a venture capital firm called 500 Startups. And after a short stint over there, I decided I have a very strong conviction that I want to start a venture capital firm. And we launched 8X Ventures in January this year.
So this is something that I wanted to go a little bit deep. So one reason for me for doing the podcast and other things is that I also want to launch a fund. At least that was my thought when I started this. But understanding the industry more, I have a different opinion, slightly different opinion. I'm like, if there is a great fund that you can probably work for, that also makes sense. Because I had built startups, your initial thought is like, I'm good enough to do better than everyone else who's been doing it for maybe 40, 50 years, or doing it in a completely different way or better way. So yeah, why not stay in that fund and become a partner there, and why launch a separate fund?
So it's a matter of conviction now and identifying the opportunity. What my realization was, there is a segment called deep tech in Asia, which is largely underserved, and the conviction was that the it's going to boom very soon. Now, if you join any existing funds with the existing investment thesis, even if you have a strongest conviction, unless you launch a fund under that brand name, a separate fund, you cannot just change the investment thesis and say, no, now instead of investing in sector agnostic early stage startups, we are going to do deep tech only seed to series A startup. You cannot change the investment strategy
Yeah.
for the same fund. You might be able to convince the company as a whole that we need to have a sector agnostic or a sector focused fund, but that's an uphill battle to have. Since I had a very strong conviction, I had the right set of investors to begin with, I realized that instead of fighting that uphill battle where the company, which is a $2 billion AUM company, trying to convince them on the conviction that I have, why not start a fund with the conviction that I have? And that doesn't mean that I'm competing with them. And that doesn't mean that I'm trying to betray them. That only means that I have a conviction, I have an investment thesis, and I see an opportunity which I do not think will be able to fully capitalize while working in that company or while
Yeah.
working in that venture capital firm. So that's the reason for me to come out of that venture capital firm and start my own venture capital firm. Having said that, what you said is right. You every time, not everyone every time needs to start a new fund. You can be part of a established venture capital firm. It can be the same excitement. What is important for you to realize are two things. One, do you agree with the conviction of the partner, which includes the investment strategy? And two, do you think that you will have the same conviction 5 years from now? Because venture capital is a long term game.
Yeah.
If you do not think that you will have the same conviction 5 years from now, you better not do it.
Talking about conviction, right? I think I talked to a bunch of VCs on the podcast, right? The thing that I notice is that all the different VCs, they can speak with a lot of conviction and take a stand and make me kind of agree with them that this makes sense. Well, for example, I've talked to a partner recently. They have a fund, they don't have any associates, no support. It's just the two partners, and they run it the way and they run it really well. And then there's this services model where VCs have like a big support staff who helps the startups, and both sides can actually convince me that their model is right. And I kind of, and the conclusion that I kind of arrive is that it doesn't matter what your strategy is, the conviction in that strategy really matters if you really want to succeed.
That's
Yes.
absolutely true. And
Yeah.
if I may add to your thoughts, of course, you and I can agree or disagree on who's doing right and who's doing wrong. But the question is what works for him or her. If having 20 people team to support him or her gives him a better conviction, then do that. If having no person, actually you can form a conviction without having a team to support you by, and you want to read everything yourself, then do that. I don't see why there has to be like one model. Everyone
Yeah.
has a different model of operating, and I think that's what the venture capital firms promotes: be yourself, and that's what we have to follow.
One last thing about the fund. Why 8x ventures? People talk about 10x or maybe 100x or more. Why 8?
You can talk about 1000x or a million x. The reality is, if you look at the average of the good funds, and I'm not talking about the funds that follow. If you talk about the average of good funds that have been consistently performing, and if you look at their return over a 10-year period, they typically range from 7 to 9x. I'm
Okay.
talking about a large majority of good funds with high quality fund managers, and not the ones who follow. I'm talking about the leaders.
Yeah.
So the reality is 7 to 9x is the large majority of people generating returns, the good people making returns over a about 8 to 10-year period or the life of the fund. Now, of course, you can say 10x, 100x, 1000x, or whatever x you want to say, you want to call it, but we want it to be realistic to ourselves, and we want it to be realistic to our investors. Of course, we are not telling investors that we are guaranteeing a 8x return. We are not telling our investors that because our name is 8x, that's what you should expect. But we are aspiring to be good quality fund managers that generate 8x returns over a period of time, and not get distracted by people saying, oh, I can generate 1000x returns if you invest in X Uber of X or Airbnb of X, which is a lot of pitches that we receive. That does not give you 1000x returns, and let's be realistic about it. And that's not what the the fund leaders, the leaders in the industries follow. So we are very clear with our conviction that we believe the right ones generate 8x, and we believe we will generate 8x returns for our investors.
Talking about launching a new fund, this is another thing. When you look at the data, very few funds actually make money. Talk about, I mean, even 3x is like a very few percentage. Like, I think it's around 10 or less than 15 for sure. So then that's also the thing. Why do you want to do something where you can't even be good at? Like, unless you build up that, what is required to achieve that. So that's another reason. And I mean, I know that you guys are based in Dubai, so why Dubai?
So, multiple reasons. We look at the global deep tech ecosystem. Of course, we have a significant focus on the Indian deep tech ecosystem, but we do have a global focus. We look at Singapore as well. We are in the middle of making an investment in Singapore. We look at Europe as well. We have two companies in our portfolio from UK. We look at US as well. There is one ongoing transaction where we will be investing in the US deep tech startup. We are looking at a global ecosystem. Dubai is probably very, very, very strongly connected to different parts of the world. And anywhere I have to fly, it's literally maximum a 10-hour or a 12-hour flight. So that from the location standpoint, this is a very conducive and very easy to operate on when you have to deal with startups across the world. And B, which some people may not be very comfortable talking openly, this is a tax-free country, at least
Exactly. That's
at least so far, and that makes a significant difference on your bottom line in terms of the fund management, in terms of the kind of returns you generate. So because this is a tax-free country, very very well connected to the rest of the world, I find it a lot easier to operate from here. But I do travel very frequently. I spend easily 8 to 10 days per month in India, and about 3 to 4 days every month in some other parts of the world.
if you're competing against other funds who are closer. Let's say if the funds are already in London, how do you compete with those guys? The US, there are funds who because especially with deep tech, I understand that most of the innovation happens in and around universities, right? So and those guys are closer. So then how do you compete?
I like this question. This is from a legal standpoint, this is a leading question to say that because you're working on the assumption that we are competing. So yes, we have to compete for high quality deals. But unlike consumer tech, ed tech, or fintech, deep tech requires multiple venture capital firms to come together
Yeah,
and make the investments together, because deep tech requires a long gestation period and it requires hand holding from different perspectives. So when we are making an investment in, let's say, Europe, we don't go solo. Even though we have a conviction this might be a great startup, if we have a conviction, we will go out and we'll talk to like 10 other venture capital firms to ask us to join us and not to compete with us and take away that startup investments from us. So more often than not, we actually partner with them when we go to them, and it's great that they are closer to the universities, like you rightly said. There are venture capital firms that have offices outside Oxford, Cambridge, and all major European universities and technology universities. It's great that they have office there. It's great they are glued into the ecosystem. Instead of competing with them, I would love to partner with them, and we are partnering with a lot of them right now in making startup investments. They may be able to help them in scaling into Europe or in some way or the other. We might be able to help them scale into the Middle East, maybe. So the combined capability is very powerful for us, and that's what we tell our fellow venture capital firms, that we're happy to compete, but let's find opportunities to work together as well.
this was maybe this is the reason you guys have like the list of a nice airtable list of all the VCs funding in different sectors. I couldn't figure out the logic behind why you do that.
I so as I said, we are. So I want to give out more information, as much information to the deep tech founders. The entire sector, I will not say opaque, but is not as well structured right now as it should be. There are thousands of pitches that we receive every month right now. Even if we want to, we cannot fund more than 4 to 5 startups on a monthly basis. even if they are amazing, even if we build the conviction that this is an amazing startup, and it does happen sometimes, either we don't have the time, we don't have the energy, or we don't have the capacity, it could be financial or resource capacity, to invest with them. Now, instead of saying that that's not my problem, that they do not cannot raise funding, I am, if I have a conviction it's a great startup, more often than not, I will give them the link to the Airtable, that this is your sector. They are, let's say, 500 or 800 VCs right now, other than us, who are making investments in the sector. Please be happy to reach out to them. And if nothing works out, I'll be happy to make a phone call if I have the conviction to some of the VCs to help you out as well. Let's help the ecosystem develop overall. I don't even have the belief that I have to protect my startups, that no one can touch them, or let's work in an opaque ecosystem. Let's work in an open ecosystem that creates a level playing field, that creates a better competition amongst the venture capital firms, amongst startups. Let's create a level playing field for that.
I would love to know more about like how you support the startups operating in deep tech. But before that, if you could pencil in on like why deep tech? Yeah, why deep tech?
I'll give you three interesting responses on why deep tech. First is, it's a highly underserved market, deep tech, i.e., the valuations are low. There is a valuation arbitrage, i.e., same technology built in India is one fifth valuation than the European market. Of course, there are reasons for that, or the US market. Of course, there are reasons for that, but it's a underserved market right now, especially in Asian market. It's a highly underserved market. That is one. Second, you can transform the entire economy or transform the entire industry with the deep tech startup. Couple of years back, if you think about it, Uber was a deep tech startup because the technology that they came up with was proprietary and it was path breaking. It may not be considered a deep tech anymore, and that happens to almost every technology that's not deep tech after a couple of years. But if you look at the startups that have transformed industries, most of them, if not all, were deep tech at some point of time. They became a common technology because technology spreads and it becomes an open source eventually, which it should. But those are the players who change the entire game. So that is the second thing, that they can change the economy. And third thing is the realization that how much impact it can have on the employment, how much impact it can have on the skill set requirement. You're literally running from the front when you're investing in the deep tech. You're investing in the future. You're investing what's going to be relevant in 10 years from now, what kind of people will be employed 10 years from now. So the impact that you can have on overall workforce in a country is immense. And I always give the example of some of the technology startups, where deep tech startups that we have invested into, they have just changed how some of the entire industries are operating right now. And I can go into the details, but that will take probably like an hour more of this podcast. But they are just mind blowing how they have changed how workforce operates. So to be able to transform that, to be able to change the economy, and to be able to create value by using value arbitrage or multiple means is a great opportunity for us. Why I can't see why we should not do it. I understand your question. You asked me the question of why we should do it, but I don't even have a reason why we should not do it. Everyone should be doing it. People who are in the venture capital firms were meant to be deep tech investors. Uh,
Exactly. I
has
fully agree.
evolved and people have become consumer tech and started taking safer routes over a period of time. But we are meant to command the future, we are meant to drive the future, and that's what we are doing right now.
Yeah. I think the origin, if you look at Fairchild Semiconductors, and I've mentioned Genentech in a couple of the podcasts in the past as well, to create artificial insulin and the impact. Because if you look at the number of people who has diabetes and then takes insulin shot, that started from Kleiner Perkins as a internal project. Crazy story. The impact it has like now.
Even if you think about when COVID started, some of the popular vaccines were actually venture funded. So,
Yeah.
and these are deep tech solutions. They transformed how why we are living our life post COVID. We like a large part of humanity could have had been dead if it was not some VC funding deep tech solutions.
Yeah, I've had another pod, VC on the pod, also investing fully focused on deep tech based in the US. She was saying that her partner always says that we invest in companies uh, on which history books will be written about. So,
That's so true. I 100% agree with that. But I don't know, and I'm sure this investor is great. But having said that, there are it's starting. The deep tech venture capital game is starting to change. There are a lot of generalist investors, which used to be generalist VC firms. They are now getting increasingly more comfortable investing in the deep tech ecosystem. But it's
yeah.
going to change over a period of time.
So just like we talked about just a while back, that VC industry started with investing in these kind of startups, right? And over a period of time, it has diversified into investing in everything, including consumer brands. Why do you think that happened?
I can think of two reasons, but I'm not sure if everyone in the industry will agree. But let me give it a shot. First reason is there's too much money right now in the venture capital firms. Now, when you there's more money than the opportunities that are available to make investment in high quality deep tech firms. And of course, we can get into the mathematics of that. If you simply think of it, for a $1 billion fund to generate a 3x return, they must have at least five unicorns. If
Yeah,
they don't have, and one decacorn.
yeah,
So now, if you think of it, are there, and there are many $1 billion funds right now out in the market. So are we saying that there are going to be so many decacorns coming up to feed these venture capital firms to give back to the investors what they wanted to receive? May or may not be. I'm not sure. I have my point of view, but it's happening because there's so much dry powder right now in the venture capital firm. So you have to invest somewhere.
yeah,
That is one. Second is that to be able to make deep tech investments, there's a lot of time and commitment required. The way you conduct a technical due diligence on a deep tech is a way more complicated solution and a way more complicated thinking than conducting a due diligence on a soft tech solution. It requires different set of mindset, different set of resources. So if you are running a industry agnostic venture capital firm, there's a high likelihood you might be able to make some investments in the deep tech because there's someone in making investment and you're following them. But if you have to make a bold statement by saying that I believe in this technology and I'm okay to go solo if no one comes along, it's the likelihood is low that you will be able to justify to your investors that how did you conduct the technical due diligence, do you even understand the space. So yeah, I'm guessing these are the reasons which are largely leading to why people are going for the generalist or soft tech solutions.
yeah. And when you think about the returns of like a fund that has like maybe $4 or $5 billion in AUM, that is never going to return this 8x or 7 to 9x that we talk about, right? I think the expectation there is much lower.
I didn't say that. You were saying that. I didn't say that.
Okay, I mean, at least logically, it doesn't make sense. So, if you just look at Instagram deal for Andreessen Horowitz, right? It was like 75. They returned their investment. I think they invested in 5 million or something, and then got 75 million. But for a $500 million seed fund, just a $500 million seed fund, that is nothing.
Exactly. So of course they got a lot of popularity because some of the deals, and it's a great fund. A16Z is a great fund, and they have done amazing startups have come out from them. But you're right. If you make an investment, if you make small checks, and if you follow spray and pray, I know they don't do that, but for a lack of better word, if you do spray and pray, it's unlikely that you're going to generate a 8x returns.
Now let's get back to the part where we were talking about the support that you offer to deep tech startups. Yeah, why do you think if there are like competing VC funds looking to get in a deal, why should somebody take your
So
money?
first of all, when I say, I mean I include our LPs as well. We are very deep rooted into the Middle East ecosystem, especially the ecosystem that requires Industry 4.0 and clean tech solutions. And because we are deep rooted over there, and some of the LPs are billionaires. At the bare minimum, we can get you a foot in the door of the Middle Eastern companies that will use your solution. The price point that the Middle Eastern companies will pay for a solution here is a lot higher than what you might be able to generate in India, for example, which is one of the growing hub of deep tech right now. And if you're trying to scale internationally, this can be a easy starting point for some of the cases to grow internationally, to test it out how to scale in the Middle East, and then maybe they may be able to replicate that success in other parts of the world as well. So, a very, very strong value proposition that we offer is we can try to bring them into the right ecosystem. We are not guaranteeing, but we try to bring them to the right ecosystem in the Middle East to help them scale internationally. That is A. And B, because we partner and we work with so many other venture capital firms, and we are very open about it, that who are the venture capital firms in every industry. A lot of times when you do a lot of startups die because they are not able to do a subsequent round of fundraise, because we maintain the industry relationship, we maintain relationship with the fellow VCs in case we are not able to fund for multiple reasons. Let's say our fund is fully deployed and we do not have sufficient cash left, or it could be, or we have limited capability to fund them and the amount of money required is a lot more. We may be able to introduce them to the other ecosystem partners who may be able to fund them. So those are two strong value propositions that we are offering. Of course, there are other things that we offer which I don't think differentiates us from any other venture capital firm.
I think when it comes to climate tech startups, it makes Middle East makes a lot of sense, right? Because it's at the forefront of the adverse effects of climate change, and with extreme heat and lack of water and things like that. So maybe, and these guys probably will be willing to pay for it because it's a must-have and not a nice-to-have.
Yeah,
These
I, I
guys, yeah.
I am a strong believer that it's a must have globally. And just to nuance it, climate tech is slightly different from clean tech. What we focus
Ah, yes.
on clean tech, which does overlap with parts of climate tech. It's not so exclusive from each other, but we our focus is very clearly on the clean tech areas, which is definitely the need of the hour for the Middle East.
Yeah. You were also speaking about in Industry 4.0. So when it comes to Industry 4.0, yeah, I would like to hear your thought on what does it mean for both the developing world and the developed world, and also the larger geopolitics consequence of this, because throughout human history, trade has played a big role in creating wealth. And would this mean there's less trade?
So our conviction and our belief is that yes, the trade will be disrupted by Industry 4.0 for sure, and it will have a massive geopolitical impact. So there are two, three things that will happen. First, the production or manufacturing of various products will start to become regional instead of global. Instead of having one center of manufacturing, let's say in China or India or Vietnam, companies will start to build hubs. And because there is a limited usage of manpower over a period of time, the cost of running a factory in, let's say, in US will not be significantly different from cost of running a similar factory in Vietnam. So in some cases, the production will go back or start to regionalize. That let's serve American customers from the US factory, Asian customers from Vietnamese factory. I'm just giving an example. Depends on which industry we're talking about. But we believe that the regionalization bit will definitely come in. Second thing that will come in is right now there are certain countries which are famous for certain quality in certain products only. The differentiation will be lost over a period of time in some cases, because we will be able to automate manufacturing for a lot of things, and because we are automating, the likelihood is that the quality will be more consistent and more repeatable. And it doesn't matter, are we employing artisans from Jaipur in India, or we are employing some fancy hairstylist from Spain. There will be a matter of standardization that will come in, and we will be able to replicate that, so that the countries will start to lose their distinctive advantage. And third thing, because of these changes that you said, it will also lead to the global transportation or the shipping changes. Right now, shipping is one of the biggest industries in the world because we manufacture in different parts of the world and then we ship to different part of the world to be consumed. iPhone manufacturing largely used to be like, for example, in China, and then we'll be shipping out to different parts of the world. Garment manufacturing for certain production companies used to happen in Bangladesh, for example, and then they will ship out to the rest of the world. And a lot of metals and minerals were also shipping from different parts of the world to different parts of the world. Now there are so many alternatives to the metals and minerals that are coming up that we may be able to reduce some part of the transportation as well, not completely. I don't think it's going to eliminate in the next 5 to 10 years, but it will make a difference. So I do see that it's going to make a big difference of regionalization, customization, and transportation in how industries operate.
Yeah, I read from your website this that 3D printing is going to reduce world trade by 40% or something like that.
Yeah, we are pretty confident it's going to happen. And we are not the only one. There's multiple research that are available on this topic.
A fun fact, I actually built back in 2014, I was working on a startup called Bloco. We actually built a toy 3D printer. So
Wow.
this was very early, I think ahead of its time, because in terms of the actual quality that we could end up with was low, and the quality was not great. The cost was very high, and the margins were very low. So it's a terrible business.
But it's changing. So if you look at the company, for example, there's a startup called Twasta, and we are talking to them right now. It's a great startup. They can actually 3D build your house. They can within a day. They can 3D manufacture a bus stop in a couple of hours. So instead of and they can standardize it. They can do bus stops. Let's for example for the entire country in probably a year, and they will look exactly the same without having a massive amount of manpower doing it. So yes, the 3D printing is a great technology. Maybe you were ahead of the game, but maybe it's time to come back to the game.
If you look at Southeast Asian countries like Korea, Taiwan, all these guys, they focused on specific sectors in manufacturing. It was low cost, and that's how they became wealthy countries, right? So when it comes to Industry 4.0 and India, in a way we have an advantage because it's a continent-sized country. So no matter what, it makes sense to build factories because there's a domestic market. But if you're talking about, yeah, what would this mean? If you bring a lot of efficiency and things like that, then you would need lesser people. And then how do we get more people out of poverty?
So this is a very difficult question, and even if you go to the greatest economists, they are also grappling with this question that what will technology do to the level of employment worldwide. I don't have a definitive answer. In certain sectors, you are right. The amount of workforce required is bound to reduce. And there's a massive need, which means there's a massive need to upskill because we as a company strongly believe that there's a massive amount of technology people that are required. And not just technology means like a coding people, different types of technology people are required to make this transformation happen. So what's happening now? We have a massive amount of technology people requirement worldwide in every part of the world, and we have people who probably do not have a skill set, have a generalist skill set, or are uneducated that are available and unemployed. Now, how will we mobilize the people to meet the demand supply mismatch is a massive fundamental question. And if I talk about Singapore, where you are sitting right now, Singapore has something called Skills Future Singapore, and they spent, my understanding is about 2 years mapping what skill sets will be required across the country. And then they spent years, and they're still spending a lot of time, effort, and money skilling up people already because they do realize if they don't do that right now, that transition right now, you will have a massive mismatch of so many people available, so many Singaporeans available with no jobs, while there are jobs you cannot fill because the people don't have the right skill set. So Singapore is a great example of how they're avoiding that or trying to avoid that from happening. But yes, there will be a lot of countries that will go through that transition. It will be a painful transition. It was a painful transition across centuries when we moved across industrial revolution, and it will be a painful transition moving forward. So I know it's going to be a painful transition, and I know someone has to solve this problem, and hopefully the governments will start to step in, which they are in a lot of parts of the world. They will step in and they will have to do something to change it.
I mean, I think solution to most of the problems is like going focusing on education.
You have to focus on education. And Singapore is a great example. The other great example is if you look at Saudi Arabia, the pace at which Saudi Arabia is transforming right now is unprecedented in the Middle East or any part of the world. The kind of cultural transformation, the kind of educational transformation, because they do realize that if they don't change
Yeah,
it now, they'll be left
they are
behind.
screwed. Yeah.
And you go every 6 months, you go to Saudi, you will feel the change. It's not just people are talking, you will feel the change on the ground, the way people are behaving culturally, infrastructure wise, skill set wise. It's just changing. So countries can change. They are models, they are proven models from Singapore, from Saudi, from UAE. They are proven models on how you can make that change. Now it's a question of, can the governments of different country adopt that successful model and make it happen.
So this is going to be like a very sharp transition to a different topic, but yeah, this is something that I wanted to talk to you before we end this conversation. So I was listening to another podcast that you did, and then you make an argument that founder CEO isn't always the best option in the long term. But so speaking of Andreessen Horowitz or even Y Combinator, they believe in a model where engineers can build MVPs, and then the rest of the business is not really hard. We can help them support and grow into make them grow into like a great CEO. At least that's what they believe in. They talk about founder market fit and stuff like that. So yeah, why do you think that founder CEOs aren't always the best option?
So let me take you through my thought process in this case. We focus on deep tech ecosystem, and the comment was probably made especially in the deep tech ecosystem. In the deep tech ecosystem, a lot of founders are very, very hardcore technology people. They have spent years, if not decades, conducting research on a topic, come up with a product which is unprecedented. It's very hard to replicate. They have built patents around it. They have built value proposition around it. They have proved the value to the customers. They have done the proof of concept. They have proved that they can make a significant improvements. However, now if you think of it, the skill set needed from a founder to bring the startup up to the proof of value and conducting initial sales is very different from the skill set that you need from initial scale to the growth stage, which includes international expansion, and then the next phase of IPO and beyond, where you are actually managing public relations and a larger community of investors, is a different skill set. So yes, it can be trained, and yes, I do not say that we should change the founder or the CEO moving forward, but there are scenarios where the founder is a great with technology. They are amazing with the vision for the product, but the love or the passion for the founder lies in the innovation. They might be a great CTO at the growth stage and probably become a stay as a co-founder or take a board role and focus on the innovation part of it. But in some cases, stepping aside, you can do more good for your startup than stepping in and trying to control the company too much. So so yes, there has to be a founder market fit, but the founder market fit or the founder startup fit changes based on the stage of the startup. So same founder who was a perfect fit for startup at the early stage of innovation and proof of concept and proof of value may not be the right fit for the growth stage and may not be the right fit at the post IPO stage. So there has to be a conscious thinking. The founder cannot go by default that because I have done the innovation, because I have done the proof of value, because I brought the initial customers, I am the right fit to scale this company. Having that mindset that I am the right fit is actually the perfect recipe for disaster. The more you think that I may not be the right fit, either you will start learning about it, or B, if you realize that I'm not the right fit, you will actually step aside and help someone step in and do the role without completely leaving it. Maybe you become the CTO then.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my personally, I agree with you. I think of this. I compare this to like maybe you are a person. I compare this to actually babies. I was thinking like if you're a nanny who's focused on like taking a kid from when the kid is born to let's say maybe 2 years or something,
Yep.
then you would want to just do that, right? Because there are a lot more people who can take it from 10 years to maybe infinity.
You're right. It's dealing with the teenage kids is very different from dealing with a 4-year-old who refuses to eat someday or doesn't want to sleep. It's a very the way you deal with it is very different. It's a different skill
Yeah.
set.
I think the people on the other side of this argument always point to people like Steve Jobs, who was a founder CEO, and Travis. I think this I strongly believe. It's the personality of Travis that made Uber like grow like wildfire, like few years all over the place.
Yeah.
So that is also there. But I think, like we talked about this conviction and taking a stand and then believing it. I think it's all about that. It does. You
So
don't have to be.
if you look at Elon Musk is a perfect example of a founder CEO. But he
Yeah.
everything he does, he comes with so much conviction, and he's ready to accept his weaknesses. In some cases, not always, he's ready to accept his weaknesses as well, and that allows him to keep growing. He actually doesn't. He's like a perfect founder product or a founder company fit for multiple businesses that he's running right now. He's an incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this, Chirag.
Thank you, Rahul. It was an amazing conversation. I loved talking to you about this. Thank you for giving me your time.